And now we should be linked remotely with Brando Benifei, European MP. Thank you for your invitation. Brando has a very important role in Europe. It's already his second legislature, so he's very important for Europe. He's an expert in matters that concern Brussels and Strasbourg, and he's been asked, even though it's difficult for him because they're now looking for a compromise, the Parliament, Council, because when the directive is not agreed on, the point of balance is found. One closes the three entities into a room, and in the spirit of democracy, an agreement is sought. And Brando is dealing with the issue of AI, which is obviously a very delicate issue that gives us great enthusiasm in terms of its potential, but also gives us concerns. And so, Brando, we know that AI is something we can't do without, but it has to be regulated. So over to you, Brando. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for this invitation. And thank you also for having opened a window on this topic. I think it's important because many policies that are being discussed and that you will be discussing today too, in the interconnection between the ecological transition, the social, the digital transitions too, in some way, they are also fed by these more advanced technologies. AI can allow one to use data to learn how actions can be undertaken in a new automated way, and this to pursue vast goals that have to do with ecology, social goals, employment goals. So the first topic I'd like to underscore, this is the interconnection between many issues. That is, artificial intelligence is horizontal, cross-functional, and the European Parliament, I think quite rightly, decided already 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, decided to set up, and worked for about a year, set up a special commission to study AI. This is a choice that isn't made that often. There are not very topics, COVID obviously, but not many topics for which an ad hoc commission is set up. But it was felt necessary to do so because with this work, an in-depth discussion was developed with academics, with governments from all over the world, associations, businesses. Discussion was held on the impact of AI and its prospects for our society. After about a year of work of this sort, the European Commission, with our support, presented a proposal of a European regulation. I'm head of the negotiation with the governments, with the European Commission. It is just a few days ago that we had a 2-day round with Commissioner Breton and Undersecretary Patigats from the Spanish government, representing the European governments, because as I imagine most of you know, in this period, it's Spain that is holding the presidency of the European Union and therefore is in charge of this. So there's the need for this regulation, you were saying. Yes, and you chose the option of a regulation and not a directive so as to have greater uniformity. Yes, the choice to take this step, not only recommendations, not only research and study, not only soft law, but to have a more solid regulation stems from the fact that AI doesn't move in an empty space today. Already today, it's a very down-to-earth example. The GDPR, the data regulation, has already impacted AI because the watchdogs have stated that ChatGPT is to be outlawed on the basis not of a regulation, but on the basis of other principles. Now, each country was starting to set up its own regulations for AI, and this would have fragmented and damaged the single market. And therefore, the European Commission said, stop everything and let's have a law to harmonize the European market in terms of AI. And this means that we have to have a regulation. Regulation is equal for all, and so it provides for complete harmonization. Brando, sorry the interruption, but what are the main pillars of this regulation? Well, let me give you a brief summary so that you understand what they contain, but I just wanted to close what I was saying previously about the political sense of what's being done. That is, the choice of having a common regulation is also due to the fact that we're taking the first step with respect to this topic. It's not enough for the European Union to have common regulations. It must invest, it must do research, it must have common capital markets to have our AI system grow in Europe. But obviously, if we don't even have common regulations, there's disloyal competition between countries. And so this was the first step that was necessary. But it's not sufficient. That is, we need policies to train workers, to have access to the funds that we want to invest in AI, but we don't have this yet. So what does the law contain, you were asking me? Well, basically, the sense of this regulation is to provide rules for AI systems that are used in a way that's considered to be at a higher level of risk. Let me give you examples. The cognitive growth of children, that is use in schools, at workplaces, critical digital infrastructures, administration of justice, the attribution of civil and social rights, and essential public services. And it's in these fields that we identify a specific level of sensitivity. Then there are democratic processes too. I won't list them all, but in these areas, we set rules that are more stringent, rules that we don't have for simpler systems. And this so as to be able to add to the common market AI systems. Now, what rules are we trying to create? Well, basically, in very simple terms, rules about the appropriateness of the data with which the system is being trained, the governance of this data, where does it go, how is it managed, how is it handled, the possibility of correction of errors, environmental security, cyber security. So a number of parameters that are only affecting the more risky areas. There's a proportional approach to this, a general approach to proper management, but then there are also high risk areas where conformity rules are necessary. For instance, this is something I've been working on when we in the common market add toys that enter the market, the CE mark, for instance. If they don't have the CE mark, they can't be sold in the EU. So for more risky systems, we need a conformity system, and we also identify uses that we want to forbid. For instance, the use of biometric camera recognition systems for surveillance in public spaces. It's what they do in China, isn't it, Brando? Yes, we want to limit this type of use to investigate crimes with some technical measures, because otherwise the risk is to have a system with too much surveillance. And then there's another proposal of the European Parliament, which is that the emotional control over the student workers and workers, we feel that this is something that should not be allowed. And systems show this now. And this allows me to say one particular thing, that is the regulation is extremely flexible. That is, in the negotiation that's underway, it's to be adaptable. We have two problems. We have systems and uses that maybe we can consider not desirable, and that's one point, but also some that don't work well yet. For instance, emotional recognition that we encourage and consider an excellent instrument in the medical field has significant development for therapies, and this obviously we wouldn't forbid this. So we adapt according to the development of the technology, obviously also ensuring that the regulation can be updatable on a regular basis. So let me close by saying what the points that there's less agreement on with the governments, because we're currently still negotiating. So first of all, how we identify high-risk systems that obviously would have greater obligations, which are to be forbidden, so the uses we forbid, and then generative artificial intelligence. This is a more advanced system that politically is also more interesting. That is, what rules are we going to set for ChatGPT and other similar systems there? On this, what we're doing is to identify transparency obligations. We want them to be identifiable, the contents produced by the AI, not produced by human beings. We want deep fakes to be identifiable too. For instance, I'm represented in a hyper-realistic way, saying things or doing things I've never done or said. So this is a very dangerous misinformation frontier that we want to contain. Just as the copyright issue, we have a number of creative authors. You've read about what's happened in Hollywood, the strike of the screenwriters, but we want to protect people who have produced the contents with which AI has been produced, so as to not be deprived of the value that these authors, these creative authors have created. And so these are the topics that we are debating with the European governments. But Andrew, it seems to me that the French have, during this particular stage of the trilogue between you, the Parliament, the Commission, the French have said, well, if we have rules that are too strict, isn't this going to have an effect on the competition with other countries that do without certain rules? Well, yes, it's obviously a right comment, but first of all, we don't apply this regulation to research nor to any certain forms of open source. Moreover, I want to underscore that these rules are not applicable to European producers only, but to anyone wishing to bring such products into our area. It's something applicable to all, this regulation, and especially on the last topic that's a very hot topic, politically speaking, and has been the object of great discussion, that is generative AI. I had the opportunity a few days ago to take part in Turin in a debate with Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, and this is obviously the hottest of the topics on the table today. Well, in the proposal we're negotiating, we're adding obligations that these big tech companies have agreed on with a voluntary agreement as part of the Biden administration. Most of the things are the same. The only thing is that we aren't just accepting that they say they'll do it, but that they will put it into a law that will be actionable in terms of protecting users, businesses, institutions, because the risk is that without these regulations, all the risks of health, safety, fundamental rights are unleashed onto the users, the administrations, the territories that might be using AI. They haven't followed the precautions, reduce risks, and then find themselves having to manage the possible negative impacts that may exist. We have to be clear about this. It's not that we're going to eliminate the risks totally. Nobody can do that, but we're creating the conditions to create trust and confidence. We want our citizens to feel safe in using the systems. Well, Brando, what idea have you created for yourself? You've already talked about the possibility of Big Brother following our lives already with our mobiles in our pockets. Big Brother is already following us on a daily basis, knows what our tastes are. And I'm becoming, when I talk about my wife, about Alain Delon, and if I do a search on Google, all of a sudden Alain Delon crops up. But in the collective imagination, there is this fear, this rather science fiction-like fear of a robot that sooner or later will rebel and will kill us all, and that there will be a new humankind created by these artificial machines. I mean, is this a risk in your conferences that you attend? Is this a risk that anyone ever raises? Well, this is the other face of the coin, the other side of the coin. The European regulation concerns daily domestic risks of AI, the idea of increasing opportunities but reducing risks. And so surveillance, privacy, safety certainly are important. But then, for instance, let me give you some practical examples. You want to avoid that the system of selecting curricula discriminate against women because they've been trained to the idea that women can't hold certain jobs. So these systems already exist, and we want these systems to be corrected in Europe. Also, cybersecurity for children, intelligent toys with AI. Where does the data go? Is there the risk that children are spied on by hackers, or human control when you have to do with critical infrastructure? I mean, I'm just giving you a broad set of possible daily risks, daily life in transport, school, family life. And then there's the systemic risk, global risk that you were talking about, the risk of AI used as a weapon, the risk of a global issue of cybersecurity, the development of general AI, as it's called, that is robots that rebel. So these are all functions for which there is a global set of rules. I'll be in Japan in the coming days to the Intergovernance Forum of the UN to continue a multilateral confrontation on these issues of AI. And then there'll be the G20, there'll be the OECD. Discussion is being held on how to give global rules, minimum rules, generative artificial intelligence, where perhaps we'll be adding something more, but also the idea of an international treaty on managing more powerful systems. Now, I don't know whether Sam Altman is right or not, but when we spoke in Turin at the Turin IT Week, whether there is the need for a sort of Euratom for AI. He made that sort of a parallel, but certainly I don't know whether that's right, but there should be a corpus of international law concerning the use of AI. Not only is this necessary, in my opinion, and also in the opinion of others who are working in this area, but it's something that actually has already been set up. Yesterday, you may have read this from the papers, one of the sessions that was created in this summit in Spain, extending this to the candidate countries, to President Micheloni and other heads of state took part in a session on AI, because this is a global topic too. The UK in early November will hold a conference, a global conference on this topic too. And so the topic you're raising is the other face of the coin, but we mustn't oppose these things. The impact that is on systemic issues and risks in AI must not hide the need to act as we're doing with the regulation on the daily impact, that is AI that will replace certain jobs or will make them more efficient, but will obviously also entail some critical issues. Brando, a question that also is based on personal experience of mine, but also I think of many of us here, ChatGPT and Sister Google. I discovered that for 10 years I was mayor of Cuneo, which is highly improbable, and that for many years I was CEO of Telecom. And then little by little, it got there. ChatGPT probably found Wikipedia and corrected this. So aside from these rather blatant errors that will sooner or later disappear, you have studied this matter in depth. Are there AIs that are already far more advanced, used in the military sector? Because we know that many technologies, internet included, are based on military systems, small satellites, for instance, from the time of prehistory, before using axes to cut wood, we use them to attack other human beings. Well, I can tell you what my experience is. Too, and putting my name in, there were a number of erroneous pieces of information that I was from Tuscany, for instance, but there were errors in my biography. But for instance, when I asked to write, this was an experiment that had been suggested to me, to write a English rock song about me in the style of the 2000s, and not only was it recognizable in its style, there were things in the song that spoke about my activities, politics and what. So you were being spied upon too. Yes, so it was strange, because for things that simple for us, ChatGPT does things that are rather blatant mistakes, but then it knows how to create a credible song, as I just expressed. So that's my personal experience. But I was saying, yes, it's clear that the topic of a possible use also in the military field, a connection with certain technologies, as you reminded us of the experience of internet. This does exist, but I think we have to support research into AI, because it can truly improve and reduce the environmental impact, waste, increase productivity. I think we mustn't be afraid of this, but experience tells me that at times there's also an attempt to hide the risks. I don't think it would be useful to discover this once a disaster has occurred. So I think it is important to work on this regulation, both internally and internationally, so as to make sure that it doesn't become an instrument to expand differences in power, not only at a national, but also a territorial level, that it not become an instrument, for instance, to have a positive impact only for large metropolitan areas, but that also be used to serve and benefit mountain areas, rural areas. I mean, I give these as examples because that's the subject of your meeting today. As I said early on, the combination with the territorial environmental policies, the improvement of how data is used. This is something that only AI can develop, and these are all possible paths to follow when considering the benefits of our territories.
And let me close with one last question. So you reminded us of the macro strategy of the Alpine regions. Well, for the first time during the regional council of the next weeks, during our meeting, we actually included in artificial intelligence. I'm thinking of the copy and paste used nowadays for our documents. And as I was saying at the beginning, the Montagna Sicura Foundation, well, they're doing very important things, monitoring climate change, for example, through artificial intelligence, the Sears shift, avalanche risks. So having a sort of regional set of rules for the use of artificial intelligence will be very stimulating for local democracy and local politicians too. What do you think? Yes, undoubtedly. Your examples are very relevant, but let me add some more. For example, the use of automated public services for inland areas or remote areas, telemedicine, without replacing human beings, of course, because as you said, we need human supervision, human control. And I can see the impact, and that's another important topic for the Alpine territory, the topic of languages, translation, interpreting. At the European Parliament, of course, we have a lot of translators and interpreters. Well, now artificial intelligence can be used, but then for the quality and verification of them, somebody must review them. Factories, just think of factories. The majority of operators now just supervises robots and machines. Automated plants, which need supervision. Well, of course, since artificial intelligence has some limitations and logic fallacies, because AI cannot understand the cause-effect mechanism, doesn't understand causality, and so doesn't understand what it tells us, at least now. And therefore, it can give wrong answers, have hallucinations, because it doesn't have our logic system, can associate data, which is very different from human intelligence. Those risk is there, despite a gradual improvement. So human supervision is key. On the one hand, we can develop uses for disaster risk management, climate impact, and so on and so forth. But of course, we need an investment. And I'm saying that because I was involved in the European Social Fund for a long time. I was the rapporteur for its regulations that we negotiated. I worked at it 2 years ago, so I think that the workers' training is key. It is paramount to be able to use these systems, just like we need to know how to send an email or how to use Google. So we must learn to use AI systems. And of course, we'll think of which are more relevant to public administration. So all these areas can, of course, be a new work domain for startups. And we are, of course, considering the impact of regulations for new companies, new startups, so as to avoid imbalances between new startups working at artificial intelligence. In your case, linking it to the impact on local activities and major corporations. So a lot can be done. We need governance tools and resources. So our National Recovery and Resilience Fund should not be wasted in terms of this potential. It is a tool, and you know that 20% of its resources are devoted to digital transition, and therefore it will open the way to all this. Thank you so much, Brando. We say goodbye with an applause and see you soon again. Let me thank Brando Benifei. Well, we have an important project that has been selected among the priority projects called Progetto Bandiera, and undoubtedly we will need a section of it devoted to the possible use of artificial intelligence. Well, clearly we need a regional experimental space. And yes, we know technological progress is so fast that we're always chasing it. And of course, public institutions tend to be slower than public ones. And we're often late. So we are close to getting closer to the pause.